negatively impacted students of color. We have to understand that, we have to talk about it, and we have to figure out what that means. Working with Dr. Dawsett, again, at a work session, we would like to unpack that more. A lack of training aimed at helping teachers understand and interpret standardized testing. Kind of serendipitous that we're talking about that as we're going through testing season, but we're going to have to look at what the test says and what it does not say about our students and how we really and truly identify all students. I think I'll skip down to the last two. Inadequate efforts to communicate with disenfranchised families. Disenfranchised families are actually disenfranchised because of lack of communication or understanding of this big conglomerate called JCPS. So what Ms. Frazier is going to do and Dr. Munoz is talk about some of the things we've done to be more inclusive for the students. And I can give a quick example. We had a student that didn't speak English, but was a classical pianist and spoke 2 other languages. But we're struggling saying that this child is gifted. So we're going to have to figure out what giftedness really means in 2017 for JCPS in America. Disenfranchised families and students, we've kind of talked about that. And the lack of diversity inside our gifted program. And Ms. Frazier and Dr. Munoz will unpack that.
Okay, so looking at our next slide, you can see JCPS's advanced program data that's up there, and that shows the numbers that are currently enrolled in our advanced program. We have made some gains over the years in all demographic groups. We actually increased by about 2,000 students since the 2014-15 school year when we decided that we would have advanced program in all school buildings with the exception of the traditional magnets. So that helped to increase that as well. So some of the efforts that we have tried to put in place to improve the access within our school buildings, we have 2nd grade COGAD practice. And this effort was put in place so that students would be familiar with the format of the test. And when they go to take the universal screener in the 3rd grade year, they are not, we're testing their understanding and not their understanding of how the test is set up. So this gives them an opportunity to speak and talk about the different formats of the test. We do encourage schools also to have the students do practice again at the beginning of the school year, 3rd grade, when they take the universal screener. I did inherit the program Realizing Effort, Achievement, and Commitment Towards Hope. It is our summer enrichment program, and it does target underrepresented populations in the advanced program. We are continuing that program. I'll speak a little later about the expansion of the program and what we're doing with that. We're also working with Javits Reaching Academic Potential Grant, also known as Project RAP, and that grant was actually given to KDE, and it has been implemented in JCPS. And the partners of the grant is Western Kentucky University, who is providing all professional development to our teachers. And as we know, they have the Center for Gifted Studies, so we're actually getting that training from Dr. Roberts and Dr. Tracy Inman from there with our teachers. So that's been very powerful with moving that project forward. That project is in 9 Title I schools. 5 of them are the intervention schools that we're working with, so that means they are being fully implemented, and then we have 4 schools that are our comparison schools that we're doing partial implementation with. I'm going to pass over the next bullet to Dr. Munoz.
Yes, and for this part you have a handout, and basically like what you're going to find is 3 pieces. The first one is associated with data, and as you can see, we're happy what we're seeing. We're seeing an improvement in the enrollment of Latino kids in the AP program. Slowly but surely, we're getting those numbers up in the right direction. And basically, like the key here is that we need to start early. We call it the start early strategy, trying to make sure that we can, position some of these kids to have this unique opportunity of being part of the AP program. The next part is associated with the lessons learned, and this is something that has been quite tough in the sense that there's a lot of miscommunication or misunderstanding out there associated with the AP program in the Latino community. So we have been trying one phone call at a time to try to explain to people that actually this is a free program. Actually, we have support for completing the enrollment form. We can, we can figure out ways where we can get that teacher recommendation, and also Quite honestly, that if you have like a tough job, maybe 2 jobs, I mean, your kid can still be part of the AP program. So even the word appeal, apparently, like there's some issues associated with the concept of appealing. Apelar in Spanish, it has like a legal connotation that sometimes like makes some family very uncomfortable to go ahead and do that. The final piece is associated with next steps, and I think that with our communication departments, we're going to continue working in partnership so we can continue what we call the myth-slaying, making sure that there's clarification out there associated with what the AP program means, collaborating with Latonia pretty closely on this Project Reach, because it does give a great opportunity to kids in poverty. And then, quite honestly, it's not only about being part of the AP program, but just having a chance of sitting in the AP classroom. I think that's a way that we can also go about bringing more equity to our school system. And I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the next 2 bullets there are actually activities that DEP sponsors, but I have taken a part in. So the parental involvement series. I know that in April, I participated in at Moore, and we went out and we spoke to families. It was a nice, intimate group, and we talked about advanced program. What does it mean? Some of the things that Dr. Munoz talked about that he deals with his community, I also deal with as well, as far as people not understanding the system and not knowing what it means. And so we try to let them know that advanced program is not just for one type of person, it's for all. And if it's the best fit for your kid, that's where we want you to be. I also met Dr. Ford. Actually, I met her at NAGC and then had her come back and do some work in Jefferson County. And we have continued that mentorship relationship where she continues to advise me on different things that I can do to move advanced programming forward in Jefferson County. We have offered a series of gifted and talented professional learning opportunities, and some of those are listed up there. I do collaborate with the curriculum specialist to make sure that we have those type of opportunities for teachers regarding curriculum. We did a book study. We had Dr. Ford on the book study, and she was our culminating event, so we went through and we actually did like blogging with it, and then at the very end, she culminated that. And we're also looking at our number of teachers that are gifted and talented indoors. We're trying to put that back in the forefront of our teachers, and so we have established some cohorts where we're offering tuition assistance. All of my Javits schools will have a gifted and talented lead person, and that person will be indoors, and that is being paid for through the Javits grant. So with that, above is some of the challenges that we have faced and some of the things that we're working on. So when we did expand, which was a great idea when we put advanced program services in all schools with the exception of the traditional magnets, of course we always had an issue with gifted and talented indoors teachers, but that made it more of an issue because now we had more sites that had advanced program. So we're trying to align some of these efforts and some of the things that we're trying to do. All teachers in Title I schools, we would like to see them use Project WRAP as a model. We know that this model is working in our 9 schools. They're using cluster grouping and following some of Dr. Gentry's work, and we would like to see that replicated in other schools. We are supporting priority schools with talking about gifted and talented. We want to put that on their table as well. So that's why we wanted GT leads in those schools so that they can be a voice for those kids, because we believe that gifted is in every building, not just in certain buildings in Jefferson County. So that's what we're trying to push that message as well. And then we're continuing to support high number advanced program schools with gifted indoors teachers as well. And I'll talk about the similarities and differences of advanced program and gifted and talented. We actually have a slide on that in just a second. So some of the accomplishments, we do have an increased number of teachers receiving their gifted endorsements and more teachers coming to professional development. The expansion of REACH, I did inherit REACH. REACH was 6 sites when I inherited REACH. It is now 8 this year. We want to make sure that REACH is all over the district so families don't have a reason that they can't attend. They do receive transportation. Some families don't like their kids to go far from home, so we're trying to get it as close as possible. We're continuing to develop our professional development offerings, as I stated earlier, working with the curriculum specialists, working with outside speakers I have brought in as well. We'll have Dr. Bertie Kengor come this year, who will also be doing some professional development. And from this chart, you can see that we've increased the number of third grade students that are tested for the universal screener. We've always discussed that this was universal and all third grade students should be tested. When I took this position in 2013-14, we were at 78%. We're now at 95% of our third graders being tested. And we do know that there will be a small percentage of kids that due to some disabilities may not be able to be tested, but I feel like we're on target to being where we need to be with that. And so with the advanced program in gifted and talented, JCPS is unique that we have our own advanced program. It is a program that is cast a wide net. So that means that we are embracing both high ability learners as well as gifted and talented learners in our program. And so this chart kind of outlines the differences between the two, but we are able to embrace both general intellectual ability kids and specific academic aptitude kids within our advanced program framework. So some of our next steps, we want to continue the expansion of Project Reach. Dr. Munoz talked a lot about increasing our recruitment efforts. I'm learning now that parents are, instead of paper and pencil, they like more things electronic. So we did a one-call email to all our families so that they could get it that way, and that seemed to get them to want it. We still do phone calls. Currently in the curriculum and instruction at Gaines, we have families calling and we're doing one-on-one phone calls. We do want to replicate some of those practices at our Javis Rap schools and other Title I buildings. I've already spoke to those principals and talked about using those practices and allowing them to be like model schools, so other schools can come in and see what does cluster grouping look like in here. We are currently piloting Neglieri, and we just completed our first, well, we will complete our first full year of implementation of Project RAP at these schools, and we want to work with data management to see if Neglieri is helping us to pull more students into our program than what we are traditionally using, which is the cognitive abilities test. So that's kind of where we are with that as far as next steps.
Before we open up for questions, Karen and LaTanya will not say this, but the REACH program, because of the intensity of it and the fact that we are right now able to hire teachers that come from that understand rigor, but also teach in a culturally responsive way. I think the success rate, Ms. Branham or Dr. Branham, is about 80% after they go. Oh, she gone? It's about 80% success rate. So the kids that didn't pass the test during the school year go to this 2-week, 8-day program that's very accelerated, and the style in which these teachers are teaching and the high standards that they set, we're putting 8 out of 10 of those kids in at the REACH program in the advanced program by August. So there is proof when we start talking about alignment that these teachers that have understand high expectations and know how to reach our students are having some very successful outcomes for students. Oh, and we're ready for questions.
All right, colleagues. Anyone have any questions for Dr. Marshall and anybody else up here on the table? So, Member Duncan.
You know, one of the things that I always loved about the advanced placement testing that went on, or advanced placement offerings, were that kids didn't have to be tested. They didn't have to make a certain score. If they were interested and their parents were interested, they could put them in there, or they would be in those classes. So I'm wondering why we have to, we're trying to prepare them for a test, but if they're attractive enough to look like they're going to be successful in this, why do we have to put them through a test? Why can't we just, talk with the parent and get the parent's permission and allow kids to go in that way, rather than waiting to see if they pass tests or not? That's always been a concern of mine, and so why?
So we are following state regulations, so that's kind of where that comes into play. The state regulation has us have an assessment, and actually they require that you score a 9, stay 9 on the assessment,
9.
and we're at a 7, stay 9. But what we are encouraging schools to do, which is very much what you were talking about, is to have a sit-in policy so that it's not contingent upon a test. So that kids that are showing high promise and do great things and we can see it, but maybe they have test anxiety and a lot of different reasons why they don't score well, have an opportunity to be exposed to the rigor very similar to how it would be in an advanced placement course.
See, that's what, to me, that's the way we're going to get more participation, or I believe the way that we can do it that can reach even more kids. It's that communication with the parent, though, that's critical, and we don't, we have to follow through on that and make sure the parent understands that we think the child can do this, and get them in there. What are our goals on this? You know, I mentioned this earlier in the work session. Are we trying to see if the idea of what is equitable is always a mystery to me, because it almost sounds like we mean equal and like equal percents of this, and really that's not what equity is about. But it seems like we're always striving for that. We're comparing everybody. I mean, and I said that the Asians, 30% of our Asians are in advanced program, and 17% of our white students are in advanced program. So are those, I mean, what's our goal here with this? Are we just trying to increase participation, and will we be happy with watching those numbers grow? Because I love watching the Hispanic numbers grow like that. I mean, it doesn't have to be a minimum target of some sort. It's just the target to me is increasing. If we can increase that enrollment, then that's plenty for me. But what do you have in mind when you talk about we want it to look equitable? What does that look like in your mind when you say that?
So, Dr. Dawson, myself, and everyone at the table actually talked about that. One of the things we have to do as a district, regardless of what we're talking about, is actually put metrics to it. So as we unpack this, and like I said, potentially maybe get to a work session, we can set some goals. I think it's a good problem to have if we are over proportionate in our racial balances of the work and of the access to the advanced program. One of the things I think we also need to look at when we talk about setting goals or when we talk about measurements is right now we're not there. If we're just at the purest form of matching, we have 37%, 31%, Dr. Dawson, African Americans at minimum, that's how many we should have in the advanced program. So if we just want to be simple right now, we could just say to mirror, as it says in the strategic plan, mirror what the district reflects. But at the end of the day, let's say we have 67% African Americans in advanced program. That's not even a problem to have. That's, you know, Time Magazine front cover stuff. But how do we get there is I think we do have to set goals. I think we have to set expectations. But it also starts with not just the parents. It also starts with training and identifying giftedness in different ways in which we've done it so far.
Well, what struck me was the fact that we have 8,000 out of about 47 or 48,000 white students in the advanced program, and that is not, I mean, that's not a big high percent, and I mean, what is that? 17% is what that was. So when you start saying that you want this to reflect the percent in the general population, you know, it could be that's not really. It's going to vary. It's just going to vary, and I don't think we can say everybody has to be the same. Everybody has to be reflective of the population. There's very seldom anything that aligns with the percent a group represents. So anyway, I'm just puzzling with that idea of how we recognize when we do have equity. I don't think it has to be that everybody's percent is equal to its percent of the population. I think that there are other things that we look at on that, and for me, it's a matter of growing in that participation as much as anything. But, it's just something that I puzzle with.
Ms. Duncan, like in the case of priority schools, we have no doubt that we have to grow the program, because this is part of our sustainable improvement strategy for priority schools. And we have been looking at the last 3 years of data, because we're monitoring all kind of data associated with priority schools to see where we have opportunities. And this is a good area where we have been growing really well. From all the middle schools, 6 out of the 7 have increased the number of AP participants. 6 out of the 7 high schools have improved the AP enrollment. We have work to do at the elementary school level, because only 1 out of the 4 schools have grown it. So, and we're working closely with Ms. Fraser to make sure that we tackle those 3 schools that are in great need of having that core group of kids, AP kids, that can bring, value to what we're trying to do as a school reform, a school improvement process.
Well, yes, thank you.
Other questions? Member Horn?
I did attend the event, and I was really excited about this because, like, what I know is the state, it said the state gifted grant is like $151,000. So we don't get like a lot of money at all for gifted and talented. So as a board, if we're thinking ahead to like 18, 19, which I'm trying to live in that world, like right now, thinking ahead to that, proposals that you all will be bringing for gifted and talented, because like what I'm hearing, it sounds like if you want to grow the program, what are the like top 3 things that you think that we can do if we're looking at planning for an 18-19 budget? Because budget is policy. We're funding, literally, we get $151,000 for this program, for the entire JCPS, for gifted and talented. Like, what are your recommendations for us? I know you want to come back and, yeah.
So the research says there's a couple of things we need to do, and one of the things, I was in actually DC with Dr. Hargens, and one of the things some districts are doing is actually looking at our Title I schools and training all staff in gifted and talented. And it's the same premise as training all staffs in restorative practice. Because once you understand that, and once you get the lens of looking at what giftedness means as a school and as a culture, you then start understanding differently, and you start seeing students to be gifted that might not have been. Our Title I schools, what are we saying to our community when most of our Title I schools don't have giftedness, but they might have 500 kids? That's actually almost impossible to have. But if we start training our teachers in a way to identify giftedness, first of all, they'll identify more, and secondly, it's just good pedagogy. Even if they are not teaching a gift, even if they are not teaching in gifted classes, the skills that they will learn and the training that they will see could still improve achievement. So that's one thing. And I also think that we need to continue to look at, and Dr. Dawson and LaTanya and Dr. Frazier and Dr. Munoz and I talked about it, I think we still need to look at this endorsement bit. That doesn't, the Javis grant will run out. And we're going to have to really consider what that means and how are we going to keep this momentum going. I'm not an incrementalist. I think we need to do things more and faster, and I think this is some of the things that we need to do as we start talking about achievement and support priority schools. And the last thing, Ms. Porter, you were talking to Dr. Ford. We might need to look at some different assessments. We understand that the research says nonverbal assessments for our impoverished students and students of color may potentially help identify and move students into the gifted program. But that, everything I just mentioned, comes with a purse. That's not cheap, but if we're serious about this, those are some of the things that we're going to have to do.
Right, and so it's like planning for the future is now. So I'm really excited to have you all come back. Hopefully you can get on the calendar, let us know when that'll be, because those budget requests go in December. And so it's like sometime before then to prepare us and you all prepare. But if you're looking at, right now it sounds like you're studying different forms of assessment with some cohort like groups, which is exciting. You should have some feedback on that. And then adding the more, different types of assessing giftedness, looking at what that costs, looking at growing the program, increasing gifted GT endorsed. But then there's also that whole thing, if you can talk just a little bit about, right now, the gifted teachers that even have the certificate, are they teaching in classrooms that, like, are they being utilized, like, across the district in the way that they're teaching gifted children? Are they teaching
Dr.
gifted
Marshall,
children?
may I, please? I would love to just speak to the issue of the GT endorsement, just so the board is clear. One thing I think that's important is JCPS is unique in that we have advanced program, but the entire rest of the state has gifted and talented programs. So we are very unique in that we've traditionally recognized advanced program to service a wider net of students, but what the state recognizes and what KDE recognizes is gifted and talented programs. And so along with that, state regulations also stipulate that gifted and talented students must be served by a GT endorsed teacher. And so it's not just a nice thing to do, it's actually state regulation and it's actually law. So we do really need to ensure as a district that we're meeting the needs of our students by ensuring that we have more teachers in every building that are able to earn their GT endorsement and service gifted and talented students. I'm sorry, Dr. Marshall. Thanks for letting me interject.
And along that line, there are two different tests. I mean, they're not just all, they don't take the same. Our advanced program kids take a test, but they don't necessarily take the gifted and advanced or gifted and talented test, where you have to have the 9. Ours take another kind of test, don't they?
Actually, we use the COGAT to identify both. We use a 7 stay 9 to identify students for advanced program. On the COGAT, we use a 9 stay 9. We're still using the COGAT to identify students for gifted and talented, but as Ms. Frazier mentioned, we need to increase. There are a variety of ways to identify students in a variety of areas of giftedness, and so we need to expand in those areas.
Okay. I understand the follow-up on that. Just want to make sure we have given everyone a chance to be able to speak. So, anyone next?
And real quick,
All
I
right.
forgot to add one thing. One of the other things that research shows is teacher recommendations. Teacher recommendations are disproportionate for white students. So there's, I know Montgomery County just took teacher recommendations off. One of the things Dr. Dawson is going to look at potentially is only teacher recommendations couldn't hurt a student. So if the teacher recommendation says, well, Steph and John shouldn't be in the advanced program, that doesn't hurt the student from getting in. So you write a good recommendation, we consider it. You don't write a good recommendation, it might not be considered. But there are some districts, I know Montgomery County for sure, and I think Seattle, don't quote me on that one, just took teacher recommendations off because of what the research says is it's not been proportionate in recommendation and recommending our students.
Member Porter?
Real quickly, I don't think we've talked about the fact that if I take the advanced program exam and I don't score at a certain level, the right to appeal. And I think that we need to continue to communicate that out because it allows an opportunity for students to come into the program. If they prove to be successful, they stay in the program. And in the work session earlier, we talked about the magic number that we're looking for. And I feel that it's important to repeat what I said. The issue becomes, and I think you've talked about this somewhat, is identifying students and giving them the opportunity. A lot of times students are looked at and it feels like, or I think that a student may not be able to achieve when there are many students that have the ability to achieve. I want to commend you on the work that you have done thus far because the numbers have grown, but they haven't grown by accident. There's been a strategic effort for the numbers to grow. For example, when we have the REACH program during the summer, that's intentional to expose students to the program. The opportunity that we presented to our Latino population to make them comfortable to try that. That's been intentional. So I guess my question will tie into some of what Board Member Horn said. How much money do we need to take this to a higher scale? What can we do more for our students if we are truly interested in opening the door? To me, it's access and opportunity. So how can we open the door for more students and give them the opportunity? The idea of changing the test that's wonderful. The opportunity of providing training to teachers, that's wonderful. So I think, not tonight, but at a later time, we would like to hear more about how we can increase this for all students, because all students have the potential to be successful if given that opportunity. So thank you for what you've done, but here's a little nudge to take it up a couple of notches and tell us how much that will cost, so that it's our responsibility, as Board Member Horn said, to make sure that the dollars are there and that we don't take any step back. We want to continue to step up with the program. So thank you for what you've done. Look forward to more information as to how we can enhance and make the program larger and continue to train teachers and to identify students who have the opportunity to be successful. And again, the whole business about appealing the test score, that's critical, my favorite word. It's critical that folks understand. I know, Dr. Razor, it's critical that people understand that they have that right to appeal. Because typically, if you appeal, we put you in and give you the opportunity to be successful, typically, unless that's changed over time. Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Member Kolb.
This is really great work. Thank you for the progress you've made, and look forward to seeing what you do in the future with our help. So when you talked about identifying giftedness in some different ways, different assessments, do we at the end of the day, do they have to pass the test because of state regulations, or are there different ways that we can identify giftedness outside of a test, or is testing always going to be a part of it because of the state?
It depends on which area we're focusing on. So for general intellectual, it is tied to an assessment. Specific academic is. If we're looking at visual and performing arts, it is not. So we're looking at auditions and portfolios and students' ability to do visual and performing arts. Leadership is not, and creativity is not. But those first two that we tend to do better in JCPS is GI and specific academic.
Okay, but so there are a number of criteria they can meet to get into the advanced program without taking a test. Is that right?
To get into other areas of gifted. Now with advanced program, the test does exist, and that's where the 7-9 is. But we do want schools to have a sit-in opportunity, and most of them do have that opportunity for kids.
Are we able to change our assessments to be culturally responsive, or is it something that's prescribed?
There's a number of assessments that are okay through KDE. Naglieri is on that list, and so we are looking at that. COGAT's on the list as well, so we do have the opportunity to make some adjustments. It's just a matter of, we wanted to pilot to see if it's truly effective with our population.
Thank you. Sorry, you said that already. When students sit in that, as you said, might have test anxiety, might not be able to take the test, what is the what's the hope that will then happen as a result of that sitting in?
For schools, most of them will reassess the student to see if they can qualify. Some kids go through their whole career as a sit-in student. So if they cannot reassess to make the score, but they're making the grades and they're doing well, most schools will allow them to sit there and continue to take the coursework.
Okay. Do they get, like when they graduate, do they get identified as AP and being an AP student, or no? Because not that it matters a whole lot, I guess, but yeah.
Right. The advanced program seal is given to kids that are formally identified.
Okay, got it. And then final question is, with attempting to increase the number of teachers that are gifted and talented certified, how much work is that for a teacher? How intensive is that process?
It's 4 courses, And so it takes about a year. Right now, we're working with the University of Louisville. They'll start in the summer, then they end in the summer, but they have to pass the gifted praxis exam. And so that's been our biggest hang-up with some of our teachers,
Okay.
is making sure they pass that exam.
Okay, thank you. Good work. Thanks.
Thank you.
Member Geese?
I just had a very quick question about students and their ability to enroll at AP courses. Is it not also true, though, that even without a teacher recommendation, that if the parent specifically requests that the student be put into AP classes, that ultimately it's that parent's choice that their student be put into AP classes? Or is that incorrect?
So advanced placement, that would be accurate. Advanced program, no, that's not accurate. They can appeal the results, as Ms. Porter spoke about, you know, if they don't agree with it, but they would have to go through the process to get official placement in the program.
In advanced placement, advanced program, one is governed by the College Board and one is
Mhm.
not. Is that
Correct.
the distinction?
Yes.
Okay,
that's
thank you
correct.
for clarifying that.
No problem.
Vice Chair Wellner?
Well, mainly I just want to express my appreciation for the work that all of you are doing, the systems level thinking and the individual phone calls and the knocking on doors and those breaking down barriers, however you have to break down barriers. And it's really, I just really appreciate it and want to lift up that work. I had asked for an additional couple of slides just to see the trend, and it's impressive, the numbers that have gone up just over, the past 3 years. So thank you for sending that information. Speaking, the general cognitive ability as giftedness, this is going back to a conversation from earlier tonight about what if we as a board said we're going to make sure that we provide opportunities for every elementary school student to have arts classes, to have music classes, which we know, the brain development that happens and the cultural piece of that music, art is often that, for English language learners, that's such an entryway and it's such a different way of expression. For this presentation tonight, and I know this isn't what you really came prepared to talk about, but I would just wonder if your thought is, if we were to do that, if that would enhance the mission that you guys are on as part of this presentation, if you see that those music arts coming together in a way that would enhance this work.
I definitely think that it would, because we would be able to identify in those other areas at an earlier age, because we would be able to say that we have services that we can provide for those kids at the elementary level. So I do see the benefit of that.
I would also add quickly, and we understand, not to get all teachery, but even if we change the way we do formative and summative assessments, as opposed to this traditional multiple choice, short answer, even if we got into more performance-based music or acting out or creative ways in which we assess students, we would probably be able to identify more that way as well, because we understand in American education there's a lot of things we have to change, but that summative and formative assessment and being more creative in how we assess how they get it is something that the research says we need to do, but we're kind of incrementally doing it, but again, that's something we need to do as well, bringing in the arts as a way to assess Huck Finn.
That's great. And I'll say not only the research shows it, but also our strategic plan says it, right? Alternative assessments. And so, yeah, thank you.
Looking at Linda, I'm going to go. So a few thoughts that I have. First of all, Dr. Munoz, thank you for the supplement. If you would, if you email that to Angie so we can get that on the portal, so we have that for the record. And you may have already done that, but just FYI. And I appreciate, some of the things I was hearing, especially regarding English language learners. It is something that I've actually been concerned about. So how do we, take into account someone's gifted abilities if we're having an issue of communicating? And I'm glad to know that you guys are thinking about that. That's a concern that I have, and we definitely, as a district, we, as I say very often, we're the size that we have. The size of our district necessitates us to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. So this is certainly something that we need to also be thinking about, especially considering how many ESL students we have. The other thing that I'm taking a look at when you're talking about these alternative assessments and being able to identify students with, gifted and talented abilities and just different ways of thinking, it occurs to me that, I very often in my communications of other parents and parents who have children that are ADHD, that ADHD in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean that, that they're unable to be advanced, and very often they actually are advanced. It's just that the way or mechanism that most kids learn is not exactly the funnel in which they receive information, or at least present information. So, and I found very often that teachers who identify that are teachers who have had extensive experience of ADHD in some form or another. They might even be a parent of an ADHD kid, so they kind of see that, to where you have teachers who see this as more of a behavioral issue and don't recognize it as much, especially in boys, and even more so in African American boys, because there's a cultural competency issue there that some folks might see from whatever point of view, whatever lens you're seeing that through, as, oh, they're acting out, as opposed to, no, that's a symptom of ADHD. I'm concerned or wanting to know if we're looking at alternative assessments that kind of address that issue, to where we understand that there are gifted and talented abilities there, but the way that they interpret and process information and present that information back is not what we consider a traditional method. So is that something that we're taking into consideration as among these alternative assessments?
Absolutely. So we do feel like Naglieri would help with that, and what you're kind of referencing would be a kid that would be considered twice exceptional. And so we're also looking at training for teachers so they understand 2E kids. So what does it mean that a child's ADHD and they're also gifted? Or what does it mean if they have this learning disability but they're also gifted? And how can we put these two and merge those two worlds together to give the best experience for the kids? So we are working on those type of things as well, teacher training, as well as looking at alternative assessments that would help us identify those kids better.
Okay, and I know that teacher training is a sticky wicket, because you get an issue where you have a teacher that might really know this is the case, but they're not a trained, professional per se.
Mm-hmm.
So they can't really just call up the parents and say, hey, I think your kid has ADHD, because they're not trained, they're not a doctor. But if we can find a way or mechanism through counselors or whatever to be able to start that conversation, because I don't want to necessarily put teachers in the position of trying to diagnose kids. That's not their position, it's not their job, and it's not what we do. But I also want to be able to get trained professionals in the education field that recognize certain symptoms and find a way of being able to start that. I think that part of that teacher training would include a way for teachers to be able to start that conversation, because that's a very difficult thing, to have. So with that, that's going to be the comments that I had. A lot of other board members have expressed other issues that I had concerns with. Is there a follow-up question from Member Duncan?
Yes, I wanted to ask if we are we tracking these kids that get into the advanced program through REACH and making sure that they stay with it? I mean, I know that's new, it's pretty new, but will we track them to see if they're staying with it?
Yes, ma'am. That is part of the evaluation process for REACH now. We are looking at tracking the kids to see where they are, if they get in magnet programs, if they stay with the program, and if they're successful. And we're actually going to compare them to kids who went through the traditional appeals trial route to see if they are faring just as well as those kids do.
Very good.
Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your all's time. So at this point, I'd like to ask for a motion to receive the Vision 2020 update regarding Goal Deeper Learning indicator on approving equitable access. Motion made by Member Horn, second by Member Porter. All those in favor? Motion is unanimous and it passes. Now we are moving on to the consent calendar. Presently, as you know, there are 0 speakers for any items on the consent calendar. I understand that there is at least one item to be pulled down. And that item is item N, regarding acceptance of school activity fund budget summary. Are there any other items? Member Horn.
I don't really need to pull it down, but I did want to the School on Fire.
Okay.
I'm excited about it, so I just wanted to say
Let's pull that down, if you would, if we could. That way, I have a feeling that there might be some discussion around that, and we can move on and address that item individually. Is that okay with everyone? So we'll pull down item N and item U. Any other items that board members would like to pull down to discuss? All right, hearing nothing, then what I would like to do is I'd like to have a motion on our consent calendar that we accept our approve our consent calendar minus items N and item U. Is there a motion? Motion made by Vice Chair Wilner, second made by Member Kolb. Let me double check one more thing. Yes, thank you. And all those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move on and talk about just item N from the consent calendar. This item has to deal with school activity funds or fund budget summary. I'm pulling this item down. Dr. Hargens and I had talked about this during our agenda setting meeting and wanted to provide some context around some of these items that are in the activity report. So Dr. Hargens, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Well, and what you'll notice,
Is it on? Is it? There you go.
thank you. What you'll notice is there's variability, right, in terms of the amount of revenue that schools have in their activity fund, and of course they spend out of the activity fund. So you'll see large differences. So that really is the thing that usually brings or catches somebody's attention, is that. But it's all reported, it's all part of the audit process. So it really is, you're accepting that that is the fact of what the activity fee balances are.
Was there any concern or discussion about this particular item? Okay, so moving on from here, what I'd like to ask is a motion to accept item U from the consent calendar. Is there a motion? I'm sorry, item N, I'm ahead of myself. Item N, motion made by Member Duncan. Is there a second? Second made by Member Horn. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Now we're on to approve or to discuss item U of the consent calendar, and item U is the acceptance of funding and recommendation of approval of the memorandum of understanding to explore the possibility of opening a school on fire in JCPS. Member Horn brought this item, wanted to talk about this item, so I'll turn it over to Member Horn.
I just wanted to share with my fellow board members. I have a principal at Zachary Taylor Dwayne who is from Eminence, and so we have talked about this program. I also wanted to recognize Barbara Bellissimo, who is in the back there, and she is the executive director of the fund. So I've done a little homework on it, and I wanted to just say I'm really excited about it. I know there was a speaker here who I highly respect that talked kind of against it, so I thought, I would give my perspective. It does serve Eminence, is like a rural poverty. It's 85% free and reduced lunch and 10 to 15% homeless. So it's a rural poverty, and it's had, success of really growing a school. So it went from like 450 students to 900, which is interesting, if you think about growing a school population, that it was an attractive model. The other thing I liked about it that I had talked to friends about was the creativity. They use 8 areas: creativity, competition, communication, innovation, perseverance, synthesis, contribution, and collaboration as kind of key things that they want their students to show. They have a really great graduation rate, and it looks like it's really, it's not, what I understand, it's not a model for like a charter school, that that isn't the direction that it's going. I don't understand that to be, that, and I know that what we're doing, approving tonight, is a facilitation of a discussion, which I like. So it's always good to learn, things and look at what we could do. And I'm open to getting ideas from wherever they come. But it just seems like a really neat idea, and I like the track record of the growth that it's really spurring a lot of, parents, kids and like it. So I think that's really exciting.
Okay, further discussion? Member Duncan.
I wish we had more information about how the parents, how students, how that growth happens, because I suspect there's something going on here with parents. You present this to parents. Parents, I'm sure, have a say in whether they want their kids to be in this, because it's more demanding. It's more rigor or more rigorous, and I think a little more demanding. And so some parents might think that their kids might not be successful in that, so they would choose away. But I'm sure there's an element in here somewhere that says if 50 or 60 or 70% of the parents agree to this model, then that's what it will take. And then what happens to the ones who don't agree? Well, they go away, and then you fill it in with people who do want this model, who come in some way or other. And I'm sure that's how it's grown, is that it's filled in with people who do want this, who are of that mind that they want more challenge for their kids, and the kids want more challenge, and there's an engagement issue there. And then pretty soon you do have a charter. I mean, it does become a charter. So it's not a formal charter, but it is the same concept. And I don't see it as being a whole lot different than what our magnet schools would be, because if once you allow the others to leave who don't want to be there, and then you fill it in with people who do, you begin to raise the level of who your clientele is. So I just wish we had a little more look into how the dynamic happens when you switch from regular public school to this type of school. If everybody just everybody goes along with it and they just teach them more, or what happens there? That's not clear to me.
That you'll have an opportunity, that's what this will be able to be, to explore some of those questions that you might have.
I wonder why it wouldn't, but why wouldn't we get that first? Why wouldn't we have that information? Why is it we just get the name, pretty much the name? And why is it we don't have more information on this so we could even think about it?
Well,
we didn't want to have, I wondered whether we could have, Barbara's comment, but it wasn't, it was a consent agenda, it's what they wanted. That's
before we
what
have
our
it back and
leadership
forth, I want to give everyone a chance to be able to chime in. So I'll just, on this point, I'll say that that's part of what the discussion's about. Are any further questions? Because Member Porter is next. Any other questions? Member Duncan?
No.
Okay, Member Porter.
I think we should be careful with what we are putting out on the table tonight, and look specifically at what the memorandum of understanding is setting forth for us to do as a board. And what we're doing is phase one, which is the initial conversation and exploration. So I don't want to get a lot of emails tomorrow about we have named a school for this particular process. We're not doing that. This MOU says that there are 4 phases. The first phase is the initial conversation and exploration. Phase 2 is school application and selection process. Phase 3 is school selection and implementation planning. And the final phase is implementation. We should not move forward saying this is going to happen at school XYZ right now, because what we are agreeing on tonight is phase 1, which is the initial conversation and exploration. For any other program or anything else that we have done, it has taken us months, sometimes over a year, to get to a decision point. So I think that we have to be consistent with this, like we're doing everything else. If I am reading this carefully, it says phase 1 is what we are approving tonight, which is the initial conversation and exploration. I think we need to be very careful by identifying where, because we haven't gotten to that point yet, and it's going to create a lot of emails and angst and maybe happiness. But I just would, frankly, I would like for us to pay attention to what this says. It says phase 1, initial conversation and exploration. That's the only thing. Am I correct, Dr. Harkins?
You are absolutely correct.
Who's the
Okay.
conversation with?
It's
But-
4 meetings, so to facilitate a conversation, and then the board in July would decide to go forward to the next step. So you'll get all your questions answered. You'll be invited also to go on the visit to Eminence and actually see it in motion, so we'll let you know when that is. So it really is to get questions answered.
And the reason we're doing it now, why is this on the agenda now? Is this not time sensitive?
Well, the school year's ending. If we want to do a visit to Eminence, we certainly have to do it in May.
Okay, well, I want to be clear, I'm not putting a name of any school out here or
Right, no
even
name.
acceptance. What I am agreeing to tonight would be initial conversation and exploration, because everything else that we've done, we don't accept quickly. And so if we were to do this quickly, it's not consistent with any other process that we have in place. So
That is correct.
I'm comfortable with initial conversation / exploration only. Thank you.
Further discussion? All right. So at this point, I'll ask for a motion to accept item U from our consent agenda. Is there a motion? Motion made by Member Horn. Is there a second? Motion made by Member Kolb. All those in favor? All opposed? All abstaining? One abstention, 6-4. All right. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to our board planning calendar. So I'm going to ask if there is any discussion regarding our board planning calendar. Vice Chair Wilner.
I really did not come in today planning to talk about arts and music education all day long, but I don't know, it's in the zeitgeist is pointing me in that direction. And I think with the gifted and talented issue, with the equitable access issue, with the board being recognized as a finalist for a prize we did not win, and one of the reasons we did not win is because not all of our students have access to the arts currently. So let's have a conversation. Let's win that award next time, right? But let's at least have the conversation. What would that look like? That no matter what elementary school you go to, you're going to have a music and arts education, which maybe qualifies you for gifted and talented, which maybe feeds into our deeper learning, our project-based learning, our alternative assessments. So I would just like to get a conversation about that on the schedule.
Okay, and we're capturing that data. All right. Further discussion?
Who would that be? Like Donna, Dr. Hargens, who would that be? Like who would
Actually have a conversation about the arts?
Yeah, who is that? Like that's academic?
Right, and there are specialists that work with the arts. And what one of the things we talked about is how many art and music teachers are there, what's the gap, and how many, what are the schools that decided not to have it. So how big is the mountain that we have to climb? So we're going to find that out as well.
Yeah, because it's like I can see like the funding aspect of it, this itinerant and the half teachers and it's like, do we want to just do what Austin does in Texas? They just give them a music and arts educator every school. I mean,
We'll give you a baseline of how many we have,
Yeah.
so we know what the gap is.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Further discussion? Okay. So is there a vote to receive the planning calendar? Is there a motion? Motion made by Member Porter. Is there a second? A second made by Vice Chair Wilner. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Now we are on to board reports. Does anyone have a board report? Member Duncan.
I know Dr. Hargens and I attended ribbon cutting at Iroquois High School the other day. Their outdoor amphitheater was completed, and it was all one of those projects that the kids envisioned and designed and then created with the help of ACE mentors and many other people. But it was we hope to see activities out there at the Iroquois Outdoor Amphitheater on the campus of Iroquois High School. Let's see, what else? I had said at the time, I wish every one of our career tech programs could have a public face like that, so that when people go by they know what that school, what that school's specialty is. They know, they see public evidence of what our programs are producing. And of course, when you have a performance at YPAS, which I think Dr. Wilner was there, and I saw Dr. Wilner, I didn't see anybody else there, but YPAS, we attended that with my grandkids, watched the Drowsy Chaperone, and it's always amazing to watch the level of talent that produces these shows. I mean, it's just phenomenal, and that includes the adults too. I think Georgette Clyer was the director, and Tim Murner was musical director, and Gail Benedict and David Sessler did the choreographies. But it was just amazing performance, and as it always is. And I don't know why these didn't stick in my head. There's one more. I wanted to thank and recognize Craig Hammonds for his work that he does with elementary cross country. I know nobody's hearing this, but Craig Hammonds is just amazing in the hours that he devotes to our elementary school cross country programs. Hundreds of kids show up, hundreds of parents and kids show up for these meets. He lines these courses, does all that work mostly by himself, and then tries to maintain them. I think they had 3 out at Charlie Vettner Park and 3 spring meets out there, but he does the course himself and then runs the meet and gives the awards and is there until after dark. And I just think he does an amazing job with that and has encouraged participation, widespread participation from our elementary schools in that. And that is through the Healthy Schools, let's see, I never get that name right. Healthy Schools of Excellence, Health Schools of Excellence program. But anyway, just appreciate the work that Craig Hammonds does.
Thank you, Member Duncan. Any further board reports? Member Horn.
Just briefly to let you know that my committee meeting minutes are online on the website, on the board
Portal.
link. So I was going to see, Angie, if you can just attach those minutes each month, like so that they can have them for our meeting. Just, and I'll enter it as like a committee report, and that'll just be, the minutes will be my report. So you can just read it, and then you'll have the report. Okay, and the meeting is the 3rd Thursday of every month. We had over 30 people there. It was really nice. It's a community advisory, so it's a little bit different than the other committees, and it'll be meeting this next week on Thursday.
Any further board reports? Member Porter.
Just quickly, I want to go back and recognize the Lincoln Performing Arts School. Dr. Harkins mentioned that in her superintendent's report, 50 years of celebration for the fine school that it is now. To remind some of us that weren't here 50 years ago, the steps that have happened along the way for Lincoln, which started out being a traditional elementary school, and at one point we thought we were going to close that school. It did not close, and we went in with the performing arts, and it is now extremely successful. The Black Box Theater, the community that has made the school what it is by participating. So the celebration was on a Saturday. It was wonderful with student performances. President Lincoln was there, as a matter of fact. I got to shake his hand and I got to hear his address. So I want to give a shout out to where Lincoln was and to where it is now, and the fact that we celebrated 50 years for Lincoln Performing Arts School. That's phenomenal, and congratulations to everyone that made that possible. I was not on the advisory committee when the arts came there. Board member Elmore and Ms. Carol Haddad worked on that committee, so I want to give them a shout out for the work that they did to be there to assist and support. But I'm a faithful board member now and very proud and honored to serve for Lincoln Performing Arts School. Just a couple of comments about the Kentucky Derby Festival. We had many of our students that were involved in the Pegasus Parade. Want to give a shout out to McFerrin and Western Performing Arts. Their step team was part of the parade. We had one of our school bands that was in there. And then the Derby Festival has an art contest, and I was not able to get a picture of the work of Ashton Jones from Manual. She's a junior. She won the art contest. She lives in Board Member Wilner's district. The picture is phenomenal, so I hope that when we have our next board meeting, we will be able to put it up for everyone to see. She is a junior, and you will not believe that when you see her artwork. But we had other students. I'm just mentioning the schools from my district, Brown and Manual, that were recognized in the art contest as well. Also, during the Derby celebrations, the 100 Black Men of Louisville have a celebration to recognize young men every year. And this year, for their evening program, Dr. John Marshall got the Leadership Award. But congratulations, Dr. Marshall. And I also want to speak to Michael White, who was honored. Michael passed, I believe, last year. This is important to say. He was a student of the Brown School. He was my student when I was a counselor there. He was in Bingham Fellows with me. Michael graduated school, got turned around a bit, and got involved in things that were not helpful for him. But he turned his life around totally. And after he came back to this community and did work, he has 25 plus years of mentoring for young men in this district in Louisville, Jefferson County, but also he set up a work program for recovering alcoholics and drug offenders. And because of that, part of Jefferson Street has been named for Michael White. So I want to appropriately give him a shout out, because just because we fall down, we get up. I heard Denzel Washington in a speech say, fall down 8 times, get up 9. So I'm proud to say that Michael White was appropriately honored at the 100 Black Men celebration, as well as Dr. John Marshall. That completes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Porter. Once again, any further discussions or board reports? All right, hearing none, we'll move on from here. As mentioned earlier, the next item on the agenda would be speakers. We've already moved that up, so we're going to move on to our next item, which is the executive session. As mentioned earlier, there will be 3 executive sessions this evening. One will be dealing with labor negotiations, another with litigation, and the third will be the possible appointment of an individual employee. So at this time, I'm going to move into our first item, which will be the labor negotiations executive session. The board will now conduct a closed session as permitted by KRS 61.8101E of the Open Meetings Act for the purpose of a discussion relating to collective bargaining negotiations. Is there a motion? Motion made by Member Horn, second made by Vice Chair Wilner. All in favor? Motion is unanimous. We are now in executive session. For everyone out here in the audience, you are more than welcome to have a good evening and thank you for coming. Yeah, I guess so. That's right.